All right. Let me know when you guys can hear me, both in the live chat and, of course, on the Moore's Law's Dead Discord that you get that you get availability to if you support Moore's Law's Dead on Patreon. Sorry, it's been a very chaotic week, so I'm sorry I'm a little late and tired. But we'll try to pick up the energy with the bombshell leaks I'm going to be dropping in a second here. Let me see. Do you guys hear me? You should. Still waiting for you guys to confirm my audio sounds okay. Okay, thank you. I do need to check that because YouTube does not really let you do anything once you get started. So if it's not working, it's best to fix it from the start. But it seems like it is working now. And so welcome to Loose Ends. This is, of course, the ideally around the end of a month live stream I do where I answer any and all questions you guys have about really anything we've been talking about, anything upcoming. I'm here. I got nothing to hide. Ask me what I really think about just about anything. Of course, patrons get to submit questions ahead of time. And so I work through those back and forth with the live chat questions that I see. Tips are appreciated. Any tipped question is, of course, also just noticed before the other ones as well. But because this channel has gotten pretty much so many connections now, I always seem, I always feel like I have to work some lingering leaks into my loose ends so I don't, miss a chance to say them in a timely fashion. And so let's get right into the opening leaks. But again, if you have any questions, put those in the live chat and I will get to the tipped ones in order with the patron questions. But let me put down a timestamp for this. All right. So, first leak, if you will, of this live stream, I want to talk about RTX 4060 Ti 16 gigabyte sales. And I don't think this really deserved its own video. I mean, how many times do you have to do a video after a Lovelace graphics card comes out saying sales are bad before? Is it a leak if everyone knows that's going to happen? And that's why I'm putting this into the live stream. But what I would say is if you think 4060 Ti sales are bad, they're not bad. They're non-existent. This card almost doesn't exist. Like that is how bad it is. And I'm going to quote three different sources here. Well, the first group actually is just various people I talked to at Micro Centers. They don't seem to have them. In fact, one of my contacts at Micro Center said, "Wait, it came out today? We don't have it. And we don't have any indication where we're going to get it." And then another retailer who wants to remain at least somewhat anonymous told me that his AIB contacts don't have any availability for him in the near term, and they don't know if they ever will for the 4060 Ti 16 gigabytes. So that's two retailers, one of them a really big one, saying they don't have any 4060 Ti 16 gigabytes for sale. And then if you look on Newegg, there's like a handful of models. Some AIBs I've talked to say they have no plans to make them at all. And in fact, one of my best supply and distribution sources says that around 10,000 units at most were supplied for North America. Keep in mind, around 80 to 120,000 4090s were supplied for North America. And I think even 4080s, it was like 20 to 40,000. 10,000 is like, honestly, 10,000 units. We're starting to get close to the Ampere launch volume. When the RTX 3080 launched effectively with no volume, that's how bad it is. And I think it's for two reasons. Number one, Nvidia is switching basically all 4 nanometer supply, or as much as they think they can, to Hopper, because that's where the money's going to be made now. They've borked this generation. But also, AIBs don't even want this card. So I just thought it'd be good to open up with that to just let you guys know. No, seriously, though, 4060 Ti's aren't bad sales. They may be worse than launch Ampere sales in that they don't exist. And then let me move on to the next, leak, if you will. So the next thing I want to talk about, just at least briefly here, is the RX 7900. Now, of course, I put out a leak a week ago talking about the RX 7900 with 70 compute units. That's the Navi 31 graphics die inside of a Navi 32 package. The idea being you're saving money on MCDs, You're saving money on the package itself, and it's smaller, so it can fit into laptops. But also, it's built so that you can use up the worst yields of Navi 31 literally in like 7800 designs. So if you're an AIB and you design an RX 7700 or 7800 card, the 7900 configuration literally drops in. Nothing else you got to do. And that means the only real changing cost for the 7900 over the 7800 that uses full Navi 32 designs, it's like 20 bucks in silicon. Nothing else changes. The board's not more expensive. The cooler won't be more expensive. You don't need to design a different board. That's the entire point. Now, if you'll remember, I've been indicating for, I believe, for a month now on and off on Broken Silicon that some of my sources have said that the 7900 might not even come to all regions. In fact, I think I don't know if I said it publicly, but a couple sources said China specifically. Like it really might just come to China. And I want to talk briefly about why that might make sense. So, look, 70 compute unit yields. It's only a 300 millimeter squared 5 nanometer die for Navi 31's GCD. So that's already small on a small die size on a node that's really good yields. Okay, so that means the percentage you're going to have that are going to be that much disabled down. There's not going to be many. Now, there will be some. There's always some yields that will have one of every type of defect, and that's when you're going to cut off. Like, I don't want to get above what I really understand, but how it was described to me is there are certain types of defects. One card will be built around one set of defects, another card will be built around others. And the crazy disabled cards, like an RTX 3050 desktop that uses GA106, or this card right here, these are all ones that go, okay, what's literally everything that can go wrong? We're going to disable one of each of those things, and that's why it looks extra disabled. It's just to like catch everything in a bottom unit model. And there's not going to be a lot of them. So if you can only launch to a limited amount of areas, you might choose the China region because, well, first of all, again, just stating the obvious, if it was one region overall in general, going to one region means you have warranties for one region, customer support for one region. You only need to ship to one region. It's much easier. And then you have to think about the Chinese market. You know, they have a middle class. It's not very big, relatively speaking, but it's a country of 1.4 billion people. So there is a lower middle class there that's kind of comparable, maybe, to the size of America. And, well, okay, but if it's lower middle class by Western standards, they probably want to be upsold on a mid range card. That's why we see all of these weird cards released in China. Like, for example, the 1065 gigabyte. Google it, 1065 gigabyte for China. That's there because it's a way to, like, use a limited amount of weirdly bad yields for a market that wants to be told they have high end or mid-range, but it's really disabled more than it should be. But then they can advertise it to that market as the 7900. Only one market for customer support. Additionally, gaming cafes are pretty big in China. Like, that's really the standard for gaming. You go to a cafe. Well, if you think about it, well, also then if you're launching to that region and internet cafes buy any amount of 7900s for their premium gaming system that you can rent, well, that means it's centralized. Like if 5 7900s break, it might be at one internet cafe with 1,000 cards and they'll call AMD. It'll be easier, less back and forth, only one person to deal with. Whereas in the US, if 5 cards break, that's 5 different Americans dealing with 5 different customer support people. So it makes sense for all those regions. It's low volume. It's, a card that is probably only going to be 10 to 15% stronger than the 7800. And so you really only want to launch it to one region. Why not launch it to a region where they might want to be upsold slightly to the bare minimum of being the top die? In fact, because it is technically using the Navi 31 GCD, if it is called the 7900, then you could see an internet gaming cafe go, rent our 7900 series system. But it's really about as strong as Navi 32 anyways. But they could advertise it as that. Now, to be fair though, I still think it should be called the 7800 XD. The 7800 XD compared to the 7800 that I leaked, it is now being confirmed by all the watts at the performance I said it would be. It's like if it's 10 to 15% stronger, that's fine. 7800, 7800 XT, Navi 32, bottom Navi 31. I still think it should be called the 7800 XT. And frankly, you can't discount the fact that they might bring it to the US or other regions eventually. Like maybe remember, it's using the same configuration as the W7800 professional card. So what they're probably using as a 7900 is just the less efficient yields or lower clocking yields. If that's what they're doing, then they can just kind of shove the very small amount into China now, and then if they ever have an excess inventory, then they launch it in the US. Maybe they'll even launch it in the US as the 7800 XT, even though it's the same card. They've called different cards the same card, different names multiple times in their past as well. So I just wanted to put some of those thoughts out there about the 7900. I think I had some discussions with people in the Moore's Law's Dead Discord recently, and I thought there's some interesting points pointed out by multiple people, not just me, but other people there too. Again, remember, even just $2 a month gets you access to that. And all right, one more leak to get to, which I would argue is actually the biggest leak I am dropping today in this loose ends episode. And it is about Meta and Intel. So there is a link in the description. In my Intel's Nerfed Future leak video, I talked about how there was one company that was thinking about leaving Intel. And if it did, it'd be a very bad omen of things of the future to come for Intel. All right. Well, I've finally been given the approval. Well, not just the approval to talk about this, but also it's gone forward long enough that it seems like it's safe to talk about. Like, right? Like things that are bad or good can sound like they're going to happen. And then you might want to wait a month to see how it really pans out. And it seems like that customer that Intel was really targeting Sierra Forest at is Meta, and they're not happy with Intel. And basically, they told Intel, we need you to get basically design finalization, QSing, and like everything we need to believe you that you're going to launch Sierra Forest on time by a specific date. If it slips again, we're not doing this whole Sierra Forest bullshit. We're not doing this again. We're not going to sit here and watch you tell us that it's going to come out in 2 months, every 2 months, and then it ends up a year late. Especially not when Bergamo is launching now. AMD Bergamo's out now. It's 128 cores, 256 threads now. That's going to crush Sierra Forest, which is just 144 cores, no hyperthreading at first. There's a higher core count model coming, but that's going to come around 192 core Turin dense anyway. So from Meta's perspective, if there are any more delays, we might as well just get Bergamo. And yeah, so let me quote this directly here because I actually did summarize, I think, the most compact way of putting it. Here, quoting someone from Intel. Sierra Forest was a product that had Meta as the lead customer, and its timely success is essential to keeping Meta's business. It was so important that the larger core count designs were mostly thrown out to allow for a full focus on the 144 core SP design Meta especially wanted mostly from Intel. But now there's a high probability, at least in Meta's eyes, that a new required stepping that Intel has warned Meta about recently will delay QS from 2023 to potentially early 2024. And therefore, they are done putting all of their eggs in the Intel basket. Bergamo will be ready this year anyways. It seems like they're going to switch to that for a lot of their future servers. Now, to be clear, though, Meta hasn't said they're going to completely switch from Intel, right? There's only so many things I can put in the title. They're not dropping all of Intel. The decision hasn't been made to drop all Intel servers forever. And frankly, that's a decision that would never be made. No one's going to drop something and then never potentially come back. Look at where AMD was 10 years ago. Now they're back in server. Eventually, people will come back if they do well. But it is likely, even though they're still going to buy some Sierra Forest, that Meta is going to pivot to Bergamo and then Bergamo next pretty heavily over the next year. It's not going to be all Intel anymore. And in fact, the most damning proof of this is I was actually warned about this happening. God, I want to say 2 or 3 months ago. Well, whenever the Intel Nerf Future video came out, actually, that's like a month after when I heard about this. So look that up. Um, you know, when at the AMD AI data center event, Meta walked on stage, that wasn't planned months ahead of time. And I think it was a loose ends or something where I said, I think it was a video. I said, one of the customers I warned you about appeared on stage next to AMD. I'm not going to say who they are yet. It was Meta. Look it up. They went on stage and they planned to do that like a week or something before the event, not a month ahead of time. It was a surprise. They asked AMD, and it was a shot across the bow at Intel. That was Meta going, hey, Intel, remember how we warned you? Now we're on stage with AMD saying we're going to buy some Bergamo. We're not kidding. And so that's it. If Intel keeps things together, they may get most of the Meta business back with Clearwater Forest. That is the successor to Sierra Forest. But right now, it seems like Meta is preparing pretty heavily to pivot a significant amount of their server business from Intel to AMD. No, nothing's final until it's final. And even when things are final, they're not really final. Meta could switch 100% to AMD and then switch back to Intel in a few years. But at a minimum, what this shows is Intel's probably likely to lose some amount of substantial business to AMD because of this, or this part of their business to AMD. They're already losing other market share. And yeah, it's pretty bad. And I just didn't have another time this month to get this leak out. I thought I would do it now. I'll probably put this quote in the next Broken Silicon News episode with Dan, just to remind everybody exactly what was said. But yeah, so let me just write that down to quote for BS. But yeah, let me just move this back. Someone says my gain is a little loud. So I'm probably just getting too excited talking about something important. I apologize. All right. And besides that, by the way, someone in the Moore's Laws at Discord said turn the gain down. You know what's really cool? At least the software side of it, when you go onto a live stream on YouTube, they just crank your gain up no matter what. I can't tell them not to. They just do. It's weird. And that is one of the fun things about being someone who does things on the internet and has no control over what these companies do to your live streams. All right, so that's it for the leaks now. I will get to Arrow Lake in a second, but first, I think I really should get to the sponsor spot. Please like everybody and also click the links in the description. The sponsor of this episode is Micro Center. Micro Center has been a long time sponsor of AMD. Moore's Law is dead now for a while. And right now, they're doing that deal that I bring up every now and then. New customers get $25 off all CPUs. That means all CPUs. Actually, I partnered with another big YouTuber, which I don't know if I'm going to announce who it was yet, but I have a 5600X 3D, and I partnered with another YouTuber overseas who wanted one as well, and one of my contacts at Micro Center to get them one early. And I was shocked that when me and this other YouTuber got the 5600X 3D, it costs like $180 or something total for this 6-core with Vcache. I'll test it soon. It's you know why? It's because not only do they have these ridiculous deals like a 6-core with Vcache for $230 or something, they'll just give you $25 off on top of that. And then they'll give you another $25 off if you submit a picture of your build. So, you know, check out their deals for this month if you're doing a new build. And I do genuinely think now is an excellent time to do a new build. I mean, I think you can get i7 13700Ks for $390 with 32 gigabytes of RAM for free, or a 7900X for I think around $400 with 32 gigabytes of RAM for free. Then like $50 off a motherboard, then $25 off the CPU, then $25 off the build if you send a picture. Check it out, guys. Click the links in the description. That helps this channel a lot. Check out Micro Center today. All right, so that is the ad. And now let me get to one more thing here. So let's start talking about Arrow Lake a little bit, shall we? And I'm gonna probably disappoint you guys a little bit with this one because you know, I'm not going to say as much right now as you probably want me to, but trust me, I'll say something soon. But Compressed Earth Blocks writes in from the Patreon and asks, hello, Tom. Brett Summers reporting in. This is a bit different than the topics outlined above, but can you put this in perspective for me? Arrow Lake S performance over Raptor Lake S does not seem that impressive, according to a leak out of Igor's labs. This seems to me like Zen 5 could dominate it. What am I missing here? Will they only claim a win in extremely threaded applications with this? I understand it's quite far away, so there's no way to be 100% certain, but help me out. The iGPU looks promising. Right, and when that Igor's lab leak came out, at first I was like, no. And I'm going to be honest, my projections that I've said for Arrow Lake CPU performance in my recent leaks, they're not changing. I have nothing to change but what I've said about Arrow Lake. And you can bet a video is coming out of me that has a lot to confirm about Arrow Lake and other Intel stuff. But then I actually looked at the Igor's lab leak again and I went, well, that integrated graphics performance, it's about what I would expect out of a 192 execution unit Battle Mage, which I believe is now what's in Arrow Lake. That was what was going to be in Meteor Lake, but it kind of seems like every GPU tile in these architectures has been delayed a gen. So instead of 192 Battle Mage going to Meteor Lake, seems like it's probably going to Arrow Lake. Instead of 320 execution unit Celestial going to Arrow Lake, seems like it's probably going to Well, actually, I'm not going to say what it's probably going to yet. That will be in an upcoming video. But yeah, a lot of changes going on at Intel. That integrated graphics benchmark out of Igor's labs made me go, well, that seems like what I expect. So I don't think this is bullshit. And I did some digging. And what I'm going to say at this stage is there is a lot of context being mixed around that leak. And if you actually read the original German article, I think, as usual, there's a lot of websites misquoting and extrapolating things too much from what he leaked. My understanding is what Igor's labs leaked is here's a test of Raptor Lake. This was some test. It is. It's not final performance, though. And you're going to hear a lot more about Arrow Lake from me. The only other thing I'd really add about that is, look, long said it. I think people keep forgetting I say this. Well, I think that Arrow Lake will probably take the overall performance crowns when it comes out. So did Alder Lake. I think Zen 3 competed fine. Zen 3 came out before Alder Lake. Zen 3 actually sold pretty close to as well as Alder Lake, depending on the market you were in at the time. And I think it's going to be a similar situation with Zen 5, where once you throw Vcache in there and overclocked models that come out later in the generation, I think Zen 5 is going to compete with Arrow Lake fine. Arrow Lake will probably beat it at almost everything when it comes out besides efficiency, but it's coming out later. So, duh, I'd hope it beats it. It came out later. And then guess what? Zen 6 is probably going to beat that, and so on and so forth. But don't think that Arrow Lake, guys, going going from Raptor Lake to Arrow Lake is going from 10 nanometer to Intel 4 to Intel 3 to Intel 20A slash TSMC 3 nanometer. Do you really think 1, 2, 3 going from 3 node jumps is going to get a 10% performance boost on average? Is that pass your sniff test, everybody? There's a lot of context being missed in recent leaks, and I hope to clear it up soon. But that's all I'm going to say right now. Make sure you subscribe to the Moore's Law Z YouTube channel so you don't miss that. But saying anything else too soon just muddies the waters. And I want to make sure I dot the I's on what I confirm to you guys soon. But know that my projections for Arrow Lake CPU performance haven't changed. They haven't. Odiva Kurtz writes in and says, hey, Tom, why are Intel supposedly using TSMC 3 nanometer for Arrow Lake instead of their own node? That seems like a huge blow to morale. I think, didn't I leak that Arrow Lake's using TSMC 3 nanometer last year? They're still using 20A for a lot of the lineup. So, I think you just have to remember that Arrow Lake started to be designed in a time where Intel did not know if their nodes were going to be on track. And dual sourcing makes a lot of sense to make sure you always have something out on time if the Intel or the TSMC 3 nanometer node, really for that matter, falls behind schedule. So one of the versions launches on time. And that also allows them to have a ton of capacity. I would argue maybe that was a mistake from that perspective, because maybe they'll have too much capacity if this market's still in a recession when it comes out and they won't know what to do with it. But assuming it's recovered by then, I think Intel knows they're going to have a winner, much like Alder Lake, and they're going to want to have as much supply as possible. So a blow to morale. I don't know why it would be a blow to morale when Intel knew they were going to do this 2 or 3 years ago. So, like, no, the morale would have been blown 2 years ago then. All righty. Let me start getting to some of these tipped questions here. I just wanted to make sure I got through the main subjects without taking too long like I have in the past. All right. So put down a new timestamp. Let's see. More and more, I don't tune in for the leaks as much as the bans on chip makers in the game industry. I assume you mean the banter between me and Dan and my guests. Yeah, I mean, I would hope, that you're not just coming here for a leak. I like to think that a leak isn't that great by itself. Just putting out a slide on Twitter, saying a code name first. You miss so much context and discussion. And I thank you for the tip and telling me that's what you're appreciating. Don't know that I really have much else to say besides that. Nab Husad writes in, thank you for the tip. Have you watched level 1 Windows test compare of ROCm compared to CUDA? It has changed in 1 year and their software seems to be really close to CUDA. This is a huge deal if this is true. No, I have not watched this recently, but this doesn't really surprise me. In fact, I was talking to one of my sources yesterday about AMD's professional products. Maybe it's a coincidence. It wasn't, of course, Windows, someone else. And this person told me, no, the people this person talks to say that in tests of this month, ROCm and AMD's like MI250X chips are starting to look really impressive in certain AI workloads. So yeah, I'm kind of hearing the same thing. To be clear, I still hear like CUDA's the standard. A lot of companies insist on using it. A lot of people think CUDA is just so much easier to use to get on the ground running if you're a researcher. If you're a hyperscaler who can write your own code, it doesn't matter. But that I am hearing ROCm keeps catching up. If it's going to catch up enough, I don't know. But that really is something to think about here. You know, like yes, Nvidia is poised to take a lot of AI market share right now, but AMD software is improving, and AMD does have a chiplet design advantage here where they can custom make AI chips for different customers that I really do feel like a lot of people are just kind of ignoring. Let me see here. What else? Did I have another ROCm question on this one? No, I didn't. Okay, so let me keep going. Hamza Judah writes in and says, what do you think about the recent beta BIOS for motherboards allowing higher speed on AM5? I haven't tested it, so I don't really have much to say. I'm trying to think of, I guess plenty of people in the Discord and friends who have Zen 4 systems. I mean, I should ask some people to check it out, but I'm sure we'll see a test from Hardware Unboxed and Gamers Nexus pretty soon, and other people as well. So I don't really have much to say, except that a pretty damn similar thing happened, guys, with Zen 2 and Zen 3. Zen 2 launched, to my memory, was it Zen? No, Zen 1 as well. It's probably both, but I think it was mostly Zen 1 actually. Like Zen 1 launched like having trouble getting above like 2933 megahertz RAM or even 2400, right? And then by the end of the generation, it was doing 3000 without breaking a sweat. So if I always thought it was going to get improved, I guess this is if it's really just easily running 8000 mega transfer RAM now, that's honestly surprising to me, but I don't really have anything else to say except that it's not completely ridiculous or surprising. It is a bit surprising, but AMD tends to do this. And what are you, well, look at that, right in time to get ready to launch APUs from the 8000 series and Zen 5. Let me see here. Mark Gutierrez writes in and says, hi, I just wanted to show my support. I've been following your podcast for almost 2 years. It's amazing content and keeps me updated on all tech related products. Thank you for your hard work. Also, shout out to Dan. Yeah, shout out to Dan. He's moving at the same time I am this month. He might actually, I don't know if you guys remember the first half of 2020 when the pandemic started. Dan moved from Massachusetts to Peoria, Illinois to stay with me for a while. There were a some broken silicons and loose ends in there where Dan was just chilling with me and the dogs. That might actually happen at the new house for another month or so with Dan yet again. So, shout out to Dan. You'll probably be seeing more of him soon. Speaking of pandemics, Cole Meyer, I see it has it in his question. Hey, Tom, do you think that a post pandemic lack of disposable income is the main reason for terrible sales in the lower end SKUs rather than the quality of the products being offered? Well, I think that could be part of it. Let me see that low end income. I'll put that in the timestamp there. So if you think about it, right, the low end market. So it used to be below to $100, to be honest. Now the low end markets, if we're being clear about it, 150 to 300, or maybe even 150 to 350, depending on how you look at it. These types of cards, someone who's shopping in the low end is actually not someone who shops very often. I think this is one of the main reasons Nvidia has made so much money for so long compared to AMD. Like more than just their market share difference in graphics is because, well, if Nvidia makes the strongest card, they go 2080 Ti, 3090, although that one was disputed with the 6900 XT, but still, and now 4090, the people who want the best probably upgrade more often than the people near the bottom who buy a $200 480 and then don't upgrade until like, I don't know, the 6700 XT, and then probably aren't going to upgrade until the 9700 XT or something. I think that's part of it that you could see this, but think of this too. So less disposable income. Also, these people upgrade less often. Also, the performance increases haven't been as great. The 4090 is almost twice as strong as the 3090. The Even the 7900 XTX brings a 30 to 40% well, really, it depends what you're comparing it to. If you're comparing the 7900 XTX to the 6900 XT, it's like a 40 to 50% performance boost. And no price increase compared to when it launched in 2020. Meanwhile, you go down the stack and it seems like the 7800 will be maybe 10% cheaper than the 6800 while being maybe 20% stronger. Yes, that's kind of standard. The 7700 maybe 10% cheaper than the 6700 XT, or depending on how you look at it, the same price as the 6700 10 gigabyte. And that will actually possibly be like a 40% performance increase. That's pretty good. Then you go down to the 7600. Okay, so what? We're looking at 20% cheaper now for 20% better. Like, it keeps dwindling until you get to a point where the 4060 isn't even better than the 3060. So, I think it's three things, Colmeyer. I think post-pandemic, cooling off, less disposable income in the low end. Also, those people upgrade less often. Also, especially if we're talking about Nvidia parts, very good upgrades in the low end. So that's also why you're seeing low end sales collapse. RDNA 2 sales are doing fine. The $300 6700 XTs are selling well. I think that's worth pointing out. You go to Amazon. Let's do it right now. Let's go to Amazon GPU bestsellers. I wonder if it's changed since my last video. 3060. Yeah, 3060s for under 300 are selling well. 4070s back up there. And then 6700 XT, 6950 XT, no 4090s. Yeah, so, you know, I think Lovelace low end is selling bad, everybody, but I mean, the 3060 for like 250 seems to be selling fine, and that's because, well, that's better than a 1060. That's a lot better. And if someone clinged to a $200 1060 for 6 years, at least they now have something that's at least double the performance and double the RAM. And yeah, if Lovelace doesn't offer that, why would they get it? But the 6700 XT, top 10 bestseller on Amazon. 3060 for 250 is as well. If it's not a garbage deal, people are buying it, but all low-end Lovelace is garbage deals. So, not really surprised it's not selling well. All right, I think I spent enough time on that question. Let me make sure I'm not missing any other ones here. There's Cole Myers. Superman writes in and says, "Been here since Golden Cove. Just wanted to drop and say hello, good sir." Well, thank you. Mexi Man and Cheese says, "Sorry, this has already been asked, or I just joined. Are you going to LTX?" No, I'm not. I'm not planning to go to that. Even if I wanted to, which I'm not saying I wouldn't go, actually. I want to go to Vancouver sometime too in the near future, but I'm moving this month, so I can't. Let me continue going down. W writes in. All right, let's get to some RDNA 4 questions. I had a few from patrons. We got a tipped question here from W. So let us get to it. RDNA. So I'm going to leave that one up there and go down. Okay, right. So, all right. Clint Hoffman writes in from the Moore's Law is Dead Patreon, just like you can if you support us. And he says, "Hey, Tom, now that we've seen how underwhelming this RDNA 3 generation is compared to the performance uplifts they brought last gen, and based on how poorly the soon to be released 7778 cards will be, well, let me cut in there. We don't know that the 7800 is going to be bad. Look, guys, right now, the 6800 XT is selling for $500. That's 35% below MSRP. That's an improvement. There's two ways to do an improvement. You can launch a new card for the same price as last gen with 35% more performance. Like, I don't know, the it's actually hard for me to think of a time when Nvidia's done this recently. I don't know if they have. Uh yeah. No, not really. So let's ignore that, any recent releases, but you can either launch something 35% better for the same price, or you can launch something 35% cheaper for the same performance. Either way, that's a price to performance boost of 30%. If the 7800, which should perform about at 6800 XT, maybe up to 6900 XT when you factor in ray tracing, if that card's 600, I don't think it's going to be received well. There's no reason to get that over a 6950 XT, really. But if it's 500, which it could be, that's not bad. That's launching something that is slotting in at a cheaper price than its predecessor. Yes, that's the same price as the 6800 XT right now, but it's going to use less energy, like 20% less energy, offer substantially better ray tracing, and have newer features. All right. That's no different than just saying the 7800 launching for 500 is 15% cheaper than what the 6800 was for 20% more performance. That's a standard gen over gen increase, people. So if it's 500, I think it's fine. If it's 600, I don't think anyone's going to like it, even though that would, I think, clearly be better than the 4070, then, right? Or really, it'd actually be comparable to the 4070. So let's just put it that way. Continuing the rest of his question, though, do you have any better info on when RDNA 4 will arrive? More specifically, do you think they will accelerate how fast they release RDNA 4 if they know RDNA 3 has problems? Well, to be honest, when it comes to RDNA 4, I almost wonder if AMD would want to accelerate it because of how bad sales are. Like, RDNA 3 seems to be selling okay. I mean, the 70, let me, at least the last video I did, I pointed out that in the Amazon GPU bestsellers, there were two 7900 XTXs before you got to a 4090. That is not how things worked out last gen. There'd be like 3090, 3080, 3090, 3080, then a 6800 XT. So, as far as we can tell, relatively speaking, the XTX is selling fine. And I can't imagine why. It's only half the price of the 4090 that's only like 20% stronger. But I think things have changed this week. Yeah, so it seems to be selling about even with Nvidia at that point. So, but that's still an improvement over last gen. So if you're AMD, you're probably going, well, do we really want to launch a more expensive generation sooner? Or do we just want to drop the 7900 XTX to like 800, the 7900 XT to 700, and release a 7800 for 500, 7700 for 400, and call it a day? Because maybe people don't want something 20% or, well, RDNA 4 will be much stronger than that, but maybe people don't want better. They want cheaper right now because the market's down. So I think you've got to think about that. When will it come out? Should come out end of next year. Don't maybe even mid next year. I have no reason to believe that's changed. In fact, originally they were hoping to have it like paper launch in December of this year, but there's been multiple delays, of course, with RDNA 3 and then this. And so I just say expect it second half of next year, maybe July, but maybe November. And I don't think they're going to accelerate anything because I think they know they're probably going to launch at the same time or sooner than Nvidia anyways, and they don't really need to do better than that. There's no reason to launch a bunch of new cards right now if the market doesn't want to buy graphics cards, and the market clearly doesn't. Um, W with that tipped question writes in and says, will RDNA 4 be fully working compared to RDNA 3 and deliver some leadership performance in at least raster? They lost efficiency, RT, and raster, except price this generation. Um, you know, it's too early to say anything besides my projections don't change. RDNA 3 fell flat by 20%. Let's be clear, if it was 20% stronger, it'd be about what I expected. They haven't even launched the full Infinity Cache version yet. Remember, they have a 192 megabyte faster clocked Infinity Cache model. They could launch that would probably at least raise performance to another 10 to 20%. Maybe start trading blows at the 4090. However, I suspect AMD, if they don't launch that, it's because they know Nvidia can just launch the 4090 Ti, and this market doesn't want an expensive card anymore. So, you know, that's where RDNA 3 is. I said RDNA 4 should be a good 50 to 100% stronger. Not changing it. I don't change it. In fact, RDNA 3 is about 50% stronger than a 6900 XT. Not a 6950 XT, 6900 XT. So they kind of hit their minimum performance goals, and it's just too soon to say anything else but that about RDNA 4. It already, though, I will say, sounds like the compute units in RDNA 3.5 are at least a solid 10 to 20% better. So it almost sounds like that is fixed at that point anyways. But we'll have to see. It really seems like there were two things that went wrong with RDNA 3. It seems like the compute units themselves and performance per clock fell short in utilization. Not in all games. In Call of Duty, it beats a 4090. I just tested the thing, but all games aren't making use of it properly. And also the clock speeds were clearly meant to be around 3.2 gigahertz. So that's what caused them to have this like 20% or so performance loss compared to where they wanted to be. But kind of rambling at this point. I think I answered those questions. Alex Carpo Swish writes in, just a tip. Thank you for the tip. Let me see here. Oh, good. We're still kind of on the whole 7800 and RDNA conversation. So let me get to this one too. Hamza Judah writes in and asks, all the watts leaked that the 7800 will be 549 and the 449 for the 7700. I mean, if that's what they do, that's what I leaked. So, guys, that's what I leaked. Yeah, so, can you guys give me some credit here when everyone else tweets out the same stuff I said already? Jesus Christ. Um, but let me see. Yeah, so I guess that was 7 hours ago. I don't know. That's the same thing I leaked. So, all I can say is it depends on the final product. If the 7700 is better than a 6800 for 450, I don't know. That's an improvement over last gen. That's, 10% cheaper than the 6700 XT with like 20 to well, if you factor in ray tracing, maybe 30 to 40% more performance. What are you expecting? Cheaper, 30% better. That's usually how generations work. Same with the 7800. 550, cheaper, 20% better, maybe 30 to 40% better with ray tracing. That's a standard generational uplift. What Nvidia's done is launch a 4060 Ti that's not even better than the 3060 Ti. And to compare that to what's going on here, where AMD's actually lowering prices and raising performance at each tier, is bullshit. All right. Granted, they were stupid with the 7900 XT, but now it's like $700. So I think they've learned their lesson probably. Now it's the price it should have been the whole time, anyways. Whereas Nvidia has just basically stopped making graphics cards as far as we can tell. Let me see. I guess I'll put that link in the description though. Might as well add that to this after I'm done with this live stream. Okay. Were there any other tipped questions? Yeah, no, I got through the tipped questions. So let me get back to the Patreon questions, but keep throwing those questions in here. Also, guys, click the links in the description. Check out Micro Center and make sure you hit the like button and share those pretty big leaks I released at the beginning of this. Let me see. All right, so let's get to some more GPU questions since we're talking about GPUs right now. Lovelace questions. So PC Dog writes in, "Hey Tom, given the repeated Nvidia GPU flops this generation, do you think AMD will take market share this generation?" You know, it's too early to it's too early to say if I'm confident AMD is going to take market share. All I can confirm is the facts. The fact is I know AMD wanted to take market share with RDNA 3. Why else would their low end cards still be on 6 nanometer? To dual source, to avoid supply constraints. And I heard they bought up a ton of capacity for RDNA 3. It's the other reason that they insisted on using chiplets so that they could save some 5 nanometer capacity and make part of the configurations on 6 nanometer. So AMD ordered a ton of capacity. They have to do something with it. And they wanted to take market share. The question then becomes, are they going to be smart enough to actually do the right thing to do that? And the right thing to do, if you're AMD, is drop the price officially on everything. 250 or maybe 230 for the 7600, 400 or 450 for the 7700, 500 or 550 for the 7800, and then just get that 7900 XT down to 700 and the 7900 XTX down to about half the price officially of the 4090. If they do official price drops for all of those to around what I said, and then go, everything comes with Starfield. I'm already seeing them outsell Nvidia in multiple markets. You can see it reported on Mind Factory, Amazon. So are they taking most of the market? No, but they might be getting to like 30 to 40%. And all they have to do is make these prices official and give you Starfield. If they do that, I don't see why they wouldn't take market share because Nvidia has burned so much goodwill. But I can't promise you they're not going to do some last minute idiot move like the 7900 XT naming. That was so dumb. They have to just take the L, not launch a 7800 XT, do those prices. And I think they will, though. I do think they will this gen if they do that. But we're not going to know until September. So let's leave it at that. TMC Payton writes in and asks, with NVIDIA's 8106 skimping on bus width and AMD's Navi 24 skimping on PCIe lanes and coders, display outputs, and just about everything else, how much die space area is really saved by cutting out these features? It sounds like a savings of like $1 in silicon for completely nerfing the product. Well, it's not just about that. I mean, there was a 192-bit design for 8106 that was used in the 4060 Ti or 4070 laptop card. I had it confirmed to me they had a 192 bus design. They decided to go with 128-bit to save money. Also, they misjudged if 8 gigabytes would run out of run out of memory anytime soon, and they kind of thought both AMD and Nvidia were definitely clouded by how well things sold during the shortage. It's where you get these bizarre 4080 12 gigabyte 7900 XT shenanigans going on. But how much money did Nvidia save by going with that design? Well, actually, I'm not gonna. I was told. I think they said if they went with the 192-bit design for the 4060 Ti for 8106, and I was told by someone at Nvidia that it would have cost probably like $500, easily at least 450, and they thought you didn't need more than 8 gigabytes, and $400 would be a more tantalizing price. So, do they still think that was the right move? I don't know about that. But you know, they had an option. The 192-bit version, I believe, was like 25 to 30% stronger. It would have been 500, and that would have placed it. Where would that have placed? That placed it like 25% weaker than the 4070. I think they should have done it and made it 450. But how much actual money did that save them? Probably $10. $10 in silicon at most, and maybe $30 in RAM at most, probably 20 though. So yeah, that's where you get it. $400 with 8 gigabytes. Add $30 in BOM cost, they're gonna want to charge at least $50 more. So Nvidia maybe saved $30. Now with AMD, it's a weird one. I think you just have to remember with Navi 24, they overclocked it by like 20% and tried to make it the 6500 XT because they wanted something that had a die size so small that there was no way they couldn't make enough of them. And they did. They satiated demand, 1050, 1650. I mean, prices dropped overnight. It wasn't all a loss. The 6500 XT actually didn't sell bad, guys. But yeah, I mean, they should have just called it the 6400 and saved some more money, I think. And how much money did AMD save? Like, what do I think they should have done? I think the 6500 XT should have been 6 gigabytes and had a 96-bit bus. I do. And if they would have done that, so let me add the Infinity Cache 8. They probably would have added like 15 millimeters squared in silicon, bringing the total to 130. And, that's probably like, yeah, that's probably like $5 in silicon and $15 in RAM or something. So they probably saved $20. They probably would have had to have charged 20, at most 230, 240 for the card. So, that gives you an idea. How much did silicon did Nvidia save by doing that? Probably like 10, $20. How much did AMD save? $5. But then there's also the extra RAM cost and cooling as well. So I don't know. I thought that'd be a fun you know, silicon skimping costs. Put that down as a timestamp. I thought that might be an interesting question to answer for you guys. But there's more things that go into why they do these things, right? Like, it's not like they just decided to give Navi 24 a 64-bit bus to skimp. It's also because they wanted it to just use 2 memory dies and be in low-profile laptops. Nvidia didn't just go with a 128-bit bus to save money. It was also so they could move a die that was as big as possible into what used to be 3050 laptops, and they can now. It fits in 3050 laptops. Uh, and that's something Nvidia wanted to do. So there were multiple things that went into that, not just skimping, I guess I'll say. All right, so that's the GPU questions. Did I get any more tipped ones? Just double checking. No. So let me move on to some CPU questions here. Yeah, I have actually a very interesting one to answer that you guys might be keen to hear. When was RPLR created? Let's see. All right. QH Freddy writes in and asks, how long ago did plans for Raptor Lake Refresh, which will be launching in a few months, everybody? How long did plans for Raptor Lake Refresh materialize? Did it stem from not being able to incorporate all the features they wanted in the first spin? I actually asked someone, QH Freddy, and yeah, That is what it came from. So, Meteor Lake was getting delayed a bit. It didn't seem it's gonna be better than Raptor Lake in, like, double the efficiency of Raptor Lake or something, Meteor Lake will be. But on desktop, it seemed like it'd only be, like, maybe 10% better with half the power usage, and that didn't seem that competitive to them, especially if there was this worry Meteor Lake could get delayed to 2024. So, I'm told that second half of last year, so probably end of quarter 3, early quarter 4, Intel went, "We need another generation," and they got to work finishing Raptor Lake. Remember, DLVR was supposed to be in Raptor Lake. This is the thing that allows for lower power usage and would have allowed Raptor Lake to boost all core clocks, kind of similar to how high Zen 4 is boosting their all core clocks. So Intel had a fix that wasn't ready for Raptor Lake done at the end of last year. And then also, apparently, there was a realization that Intel 7 or their 10 nanometer node, they could probably squeeze another 5% out of it. So you get DLVR, you can squeeze another 5% out of it. What do you do? Well, we can probably get another 15% better generation, can't we? Let's go forward with this. And that decision, QH Freddy, was apparently made second half of last year. And yes, it was based on both realizing they could squeeze another 5% out of the node and also realizing that if these fixes they finally figured out were implemented well, which were already kind of worked out, I believe, for Emerald Rapids, right? So if they've already completed them for Emerald Rapids, why not implement it here? They went, let's do it. And that's where Raptor Lake Refresh came from. So yeah. All right. Gaming Since Reagan writes in, let me see, spin off fab, and says Intel has officially announced that it's going to open up its fabs and split them off for use by fabless companies and force its design team to operate independently of its manufacturing. You predicted this for a while, and now it's happening. What does this mean for Intel going forward against AMD? Will we see Zen 7 on Intel fabs? Will we see Nvidia AI or Apple Tech spinning out of Intel? What does it mean, as I feel this shakes up the entire tech market? By the way, I'm a happy Patreon subscriber, and so, put shameless promotion here, and thank you for all you do. I've learned so much and appreciate the years of work you've given us. But thank you, Gaming Since Reagan. I recognize your name. You've been a patron for a while, I believe. Um, you know, all I can say is, well, there's really two things to say about Intel's fablessness. Yeah, that's something I was told by people at Intel for like a year now, at least. That Pat Gelsinger said, whether we're gonna go fabless or not, guess what? You guys need to start acting fabless. The design team can't have some defects, go to the fab and say, well, could you change the design rules so it works? No, there's design rules, they're out, and then they need to go start working on the new node. They don't have time to fix your design for you. And so this has been a big initiative under Pat Gelsinger. This is always going to happen whether they get other contracts, because this makes the company work better anyways. It adds more accountability, and it's more liability. So this was always going to happen whether or not they get outside orders. And look, I've heard of a few companies talking to Intel. Of course, I think I leaked late 2020 that Nvidia was already talking to Intel about using their fabs. I think I was the first one to leak that. Um, and that doesn't mean they're necessarily going to right away, but that's always a possibility. It's always a possibility for AMD. I think AMD would come more later. And it's always a possibility for Apple. I've also heard that Qualcomm's probably going to use Intel. I guess I don't know if that's me first leaking that. It probably matters that some people know that, but Qualcomm's talking to Intel as well. But I think the important thing is most of this in the short term, most of the short term benefit of this announcement Intel made is going to be on just trying to make their products come out on time. Most customers don't want to go to Intel right now because they haven't proven they're a good partner really yet, and also there's always that worry that Intel will steal some of their ideas. Not officially, but you start talking to them, they can see what you're working on. That's going to be a worry in the back of AMD's minds. Even if they always say it's separate, even if they always say that would be illegal, we'd never do that. That's always going to be something Nvidia and AMD worry about. So I think primarily what you'll see is people like Qualcomm. Apple would probably be scared about that too, to be honest. And a few others go to Intel and say, we're not that worried about you stealing stuff. We're going to try using your fabs. But I don't think it's going to be a ton of volume yet because TSMC's hard design teams, are so good at like helping you finish a product and make sure everything comes out on time that even if Intel is operating fabless, Intel would have to be more than like a node better for a lot of people to choose them. Because even if Intel's node is better than TSMC, is it 10% better? Well, TSMC launches things on time, so we're still going to work with TSMC. So, what I would say is this is an important step in Intel releasing things on time, but don't expect everyone to flood to Intel for another 3 years until they've proven they can have several nodes executing on time with outside customers like Qualcomm and stuff, not like AMD and Nvidia until Intel's proven themselves. But yeah, that's my answer to that. And on the subject of Intel, let me put down a timestamp here. Um, Hamza Judah writes in with a tip. Thank you for the tip. Can you explain what's going on with the NUC division? Well, yeah. So the NUC division at Intel just isn't a priority. And this is yet another thing. I've seen their NUCs, I've advertised their NUCs on the channel. And I know people that have had they're like modular ones that have like a GPU slot. They're really cool. Intel's NUCs are incredibly hot, like Apple quality, cool stuff, honestly. But they don't get a lot of light. And if you were to tell people Intel makes this stuff, you'd forgive someone for not knowing. Like, I think this is just an undercovered, understood, you know, division. And so I don't think it's a surprise that Intel's cutting this. It's the same thing with them effectively canceling like dedicated ARC parts. Like they can't afford to make a full generation of all this stuff competing in the high end graphics. They can't afford to do all this stuff. Someone that says they were overpriced. I agree. They're pretty expensive for what they were most of the time. That's probably why they didn't sell fantastically. Although they had some business contracts that I think did okay. I don't think they were like losing money, but they're not important, and that pulls away from resources, scope, marketing. So, like someone's pointing out, Optane's gone. AXG was gone. Now they're pretending it's not. AXG is effectively gone. And NUC's gone. What matters is server, CPU, data center. That's it. And they're going to need to, and client laptop. They're going to need to focus on that. It's not a big surprise. Now, when we see these reports that Asus is like buying this division. I was talking to a contact today actually, and this person said, "Oh, it wouldn't surprise me if Asus was basically designing half of their NUCs for them at this point, anyways." And it reminded me one of those Geekom NUCs that I had here that I did ads for. When I booted it up, it said powered by Asus. So I think Asus was already like doing half of the work for Intel, anyways, and that's why they're taking over that. So. But, yeah, so it's not really surprising Asus is taking over, and it's funny for me to realize, oh, yeah, they already were basically making their NUCs for them. That makes a lot of sense. You'll be able to buy Intel NUCs anyways. They just won't be using as many Intel resources to make them. So, actually, that's probably a good time to pivot. Oh, drop the pencil. To pivot to Meteor Lake. All right. So Jamwop writes in and says, "What will you be looking for when Meteor Lake reviews come out? I don't have very high hopes for Alchemist Plus for obvious reasons, but if I remember correctly, Meteor Lake is the first design to come out from the Royal Core project. No, it's not. Like, it's kind of connected in it with the base tiles and stuff. Arrow Lake is the first Royal Core project, and that's why you shouldn't be underestimating it. So I feel this might be a make or break moment for Intel's division. No, Meteor Lake is very important though. Meteor Lake is the beginning of this disaggregated client tile projects, but this isn't the architecture portion, like where the individual tiles itself are Royal Core. This is the precursor. This is the team saying, before we launch Royal Core, we need disaggregated tiles. So Meteor Lake may be as important as Royal Core, but it's not the same as Royal Core. But what will I be looking for? Well, I expect Meteor Lake to win efficiency crowns by records, just crazy, crazy efficiency. And I expect it to, probably edge out CPU performance in 6+8, not in 8+16. There will still be Raptor Lake Refresh HX laptops that take the multi-threading crown. But, I expect Meteor Lake, in CPU performance to probably edge out Phoenix by 10 to 30%, and it might be 10. You have to keep in mind that like the boost clocks are still pretty high, but I think the all-core boost won't be as high as like Phoenix. So it's going to depend on the workload, but it'll have better CPU performance. It should have 10 to 20% better GPU performance, placing it, right about at 1650 Ti performance, or like desktop 1650 maybe even, which is exciting. But what I really will be watching for, do the drivers work? Because my God, I tested in Raptor like 96 execution unit NUC. I've tested A770 again recently. I'm taking that thing out. I'm keeping it, man. I'm for collectors purposes and also just to fact check the bullshit. I test this thing like every month. It's still an unstable piece of garbage. Like, I don't know what to tell you guys. Like, it's bad. Like this thing, I couldn't. I think Tech Yes City. Well, actually, I kind of hope to have on the podcast again in a month. He found the same thing. This thing, you can't recommend it. It doesn't work, guys. Like, it doesn't work. So, and Tiger Lake still doesn't seem to work very well. That's been out for years, years. And you say Alchemist will be fixed. Why does Tiger Lake still not work after years? So, Meteor Lake's going to, on paper, have record-breaking efficiency, the best CPU performance in like a 45-watt form factor probably, and better AI compute capabilities with its neural engine than AMD, 20% better GPU, maybe 10% better, but all of that I know is going to happen. What I want to know for Intel's future, does the fucking graphics work? Don't tell me that in, you know, like one game it beats Phoenix. Don't show me Spider-Man again or I'll punch you in the face. I don't care that it performs okay at 45 frames with ray tracing, relatively speaking, in Spider-Man. Does it run Halo? Does it run Battlefield? Does it run everything perfectly now? And I think that's what I'm going to watch for, because if Meteor Lake doesn't have good support that's stable for their graphics at launch, then this is where I go, yeah, I don't care what the performance is on paper. The thing needs to work. And I've said that in a video. That is what I will be looking for with Meteor Lake. Show me the drivers working, please. Don't tell me that you got Crisis and DirectX 9 to boot. I don't care. I want every game to run competitively. I don't want to see it win in 10% in 3D Mark versus Phoenix. I want to see it win in 10% on average against Phoenix and boot every game. Okay. Mark Central writes in and asks, how long do you think Nvidia can maintain their dominance? Well, let me save that question and actually finish these. I'll get to you, Mark Central. John writes in, you recently talked about the 8000G desktop APUs. Do you still, let me see here, 8000G. Do you still have a timeline for when the 7000G might come out? Well, my understanding is, I guess I don't know for sure, but my understanding is they're probably going to brand 8000G as Phoenix and maybe others. Yeah. Like, so when will 7000G series come out? I guess they might call Phoenix on AM5 7000, but I actually think they're probably going to brand it as 8000. Remember, I leaked that those rumors of Ryzen 8000 coming out this year, that's APUs, I was told. So I'm pretty sure that's going to be Phoenix and Little Phoenix. And in fact, what is it, the 7500F? There's rumors that 6-core lower clocking CPU, the 7500F coming out from AMD supposedly in a month, that uses Little Phoenix, the worst yields of Little Phoenix on desktop. So I think if the GPU is highly disabled, they'll call it that. And I think the fully operating like 95-watt Phoenix that performs above a 1650, I think that's probably going to be, well, I guess I don't know what they'll call it, but my guess is they'll call it like the 8700G or 8750G or something, and then that'll launch right before other stuff from AMD for the Ryzen 8000 lineup on desktop. But yeah, that's what I think that's going to be. Dave Schultz writes in and asks, hey, Tom, with all the talk about GPU memory, when do you think we'll be able to freely allocate system memory to iGPUs? For example, AMD APUs currently use but 4 gigabytes, even though they could, in theory, make use of as much as, well, there's RAM available at 64 gigabytes if you had enough RAM. Or am I wrong here? And there are hard caps like 8 gigabytes or 25% of the total memory. Yeah, I guess I don't know, but that's an interesting point because the ROG Ally limits the VRAM usage to 4 gigabytes, and the Rembrandt system I've tested so far with 32 gigs of RAM limited you to using 8 gigabytes. Now, in my Rembrandt testing, Dave Schultz, even when I put 16 gigabytes in the system, I believe it let me do 412 if I read it, or 8, yeah. And so I think I could still go up to 8 gigabytes of VRAM, at least in that BIOS. So I'm not sure here. Honestly, Dave, I think these might just be BIOS limitations. Like, for whatever reason, the Steam Deck and the ROG Ally limit you to 4 gigabytes of VRAM with this APU. But in the NUCs I tested, it just seemed to have a limited 8 gigabytes. I don't know if I put in more, if it allow more. It seemed like it was always an option to go up to 8, even as I lowered the RAM amount. So I guess I think I would hope that they go back to a unified memory system though with Strix, because that thing looks really powerful. Like we're talking 1660, you know, like 3050 performance. That'd be really good to let you use over 8 gigabytes really with where things are going now. Um, but yeah, so that's my answer to that. It seems kind of somewhat artificial, Dave, and I hope they go back to unified memory soon. Yeah, there were some BIOSes I looked at on some of the NUCs too that just seemed to have a limit that was lower. So I think it's somewhat artificial. I don't know why. Maybe I'm wrong and someone will tell me, but that's what I've noticed in my testing. Okay. All right, let me see here. All right. Yes. Let me get back to this tipped question here from Mark Central. All right. Timestamp Nvidia AI dominance length. Okay. So Mark Central writes in, how long do you think NVIDIA can maintain their dominance in AI and machine learning space? Will CUDA's large adoption make it difficult for AMD? Well, if it's a yes or no question, yes. NVIDIA's CUDA dominance makes it harder for AMD than if it wasn't there otherwise. Of course it does. But, like, do I think they're going to maintain their dominance? It's hard because I think AMD is going to make a bigger push later this year than most people expect. But then you have to factor in, well, what is NVIDIA hiding up their sleeves? Maybe nothing. I don't know. But I don't think NVIDIA is going to be the only game in AI for 2 years. There. That's my answer. That's how I will choose to answer the question. Um, do I think NVIDIA is going to kill it in sales this year in AI? Absolutely. Do I think that they're going to be 100% market share in some of these AI segments until the end of next year? No, I think AMD is going to start picking up steam late this year into next year for sure. MI 300, and actually, I know some things about MI 450 and MI 450X. Maybe I'm the first to leak that name right now. Um, but that AMD's gunning. They're gunning for some customers here in AI, and I don't think the things I hear about ROCm improving. I think by late next year, you're going to see AMD being a real threat to Nvidia. But I think until 300's out and widely available, which really won't be until quarter 4 this year, we're being honest, Nvidia's going to have a field day. But no, they won't be the only game in town. AMD's going to take some market share. That's my feeling. It's just too soon for me to say how much. W4F7Z tips. Thank you for the tip. I guess there's a little balloon because it's the first time he's super tipped or super chatted. Let me see. Okay. Now so we've got some future proofing questions here that I think. All right. Timothy Baldridge writes in and he asks, I'd love to hear y'all comment on the rather high end CPU requirements for the upcoming Phantom Liberty expansion. It recommends a 12700K. Yeah, I looked it up. It seems like for the Phantom Liberty expansion, which would serve for Cyberpunk, right? Let me see. Phantom Liberty. Yeah, Cyberpunk Phantom Liberty. I remembered right. I looked at the requirements for this, and yes, its minimum requirements were still like an i7 6700K, guys. And for high ray tracing and stuff, it wanted the fastest CPU. We don't really know if it's just putting there at the top because they want to say a higher spec at the top there. But I think the thing to really zone in on for the Cyberpunk Phantom Liberty requirements is what's the first CPU that appears that they say that's recommended for 60 hertz gaming? And it seemed to be like 8 core Zen 4 or an Alder Lake i7. And that's not that crazy, right? Like you have to think like how well is this going to run on the next gen consoles? Probably yo-yoing between like 40 to 60 frames per second or something. Okay, well then think about it. The consoles have 8 cores at like 4 gigahertz or something. I think it's actually lower than this, more like 3.5 gigahertz. All right, so you got 8 Zen 2 fully maxed out at 3.5 gigahertz. What is double the performance of that? Zen 4 8 core. So having a Zen 4 8 core to hold 60 hertz, while the consoles are doing like 45 hertz or 50 hertz, let's say, with a Zen 2 8 core, it's not that shocking. We have to remember we're getting later into the console generation. This is where the devs are building their games to max out the consoles just around 60 hertz. So if you want to go above 60 hertz, you're going to need a CPU like a 7800X3D. And for all we know, though, it's overkill and it'll still run fine. I'd be a little, you know, and all of the high CPU threading specs are probably there for streaming from the SSD. And, this is something we talked about on this channel in 2020, people. I mean, the Xbox, I believe, has the equivalent of like 4 cores for streaming data, and the PlayStation has the equivalent of like 12 to 16 cores, depending on the dev I talk to. So, yeah, I mean, that's where you get into the consoles have all of this dedicated hardware for streaming assets the PCs don't have, and that's why you're going to need a Zen 4 8 core to pick up the slack or better. And I don't really have that much else to say about it. I would just be hesitant to believe that you're really going to run below 60 hertz necessarily if you don't have a Zen 4 8 core. They're probably playing it a little safe there, and that's probably when you're streaming, so you have enough space to stream and run at 60 hertz at the same time. And so in some areas, it'll probably drop from 120 to 60 when it streams in some assets. But it kind of is what it is. Brendan writes in, seeing the system requirements for newer games that specify an SSD, what are your thoughts on slower SSDs like SATA moving forward? I've noticed these game requirements usually do not specify a minimum speed or type. Or will they just drop off a bit slower than an HDD and new games will require a quality NVMe? I ask this as someone with a bunch of SATA drives for bulk gaming storage. Well, it's funny. On the back of my PS5, I have a USB 3.1 that I got for like $30 at launch. That's like 250 megabytes per second. Slotted that in the back USB on the PS5, and that was my PS4 game auxiliary drive. Like, you don't really need more than a hard drive that much because it's already going to be bottlenecked by the programming of old games. Same goes for PC. I have SATA SSDs that I'm running older games off of, or games that, frankly, I just use for benchmarking at this point for the channel. And yeah, that's what I'm using it for. You know, um, that's what you're going to want to use it for moving forward. I don't think you ever need to, throw those away because there's always going to be some games that don't really utilize SSDs for that well for a couple years. But when we look at requirements moving forward and they say SSD recommended, I think that 720p 30 hertz thing for Ratchet and Clank, yeah, that's probably within SATA drive. That's probably you're not running 60 stable with a SATA drive, but the game will boot. That's how you should look at SATA SSDs in about a year from now with the latest games that actually stress your system. And in terms of what NVMe will be required, I wish they would just do something like, say, Gen 4. I think they're probably going to mostly standardize at Gen 3 speeds, but then they'll say Gen 4 just to make sure you at least have the fastest Gen 3. Because the problem with saying you require an NVMe Gen 3 drive is that Gen 3 drive may be like 1 gigabyte per second. And so if I were a dev, I'd just say Gen 4 speeds. That way, for sure, anyone with a faster Gen 3 is also safe. So I think that's what we're going to see moving forward. You'll see SSD recommended. That really means a SATA is required for above 30 hertz gaming. And then above that, you'll want at least a faster Gen 3 for 60 hertz. And if you want like 200 hertz in some games that do crazy stuff in Unreal Engine 5.2 or something, that's where you're going to want that fast Gen 4 or Gen 5 drive. Okay. Let me see here. We got some more questions. We got a tipped question here, so let me get to this. Oh, we got a few tipped questions. Okay. Let me put a comma then. 3D cache APU. Um, well, yeah, let's do that. Non's Goofy Videos writes in and asks, would AMD ever put 3D cache on their APUs? I recall that cache is on an older node. Does it make sense to alleviate the 128-bit bus on the smaller APU? Yeah, I mean, to me, it would make some sense already, right? To take Strix Halo, put a layer of cache on top of it, because it's already an APU in laptops that's not using high voltages. So that voltage issue thing that Vcache has wouldn't really be as much of a factor. But as far as I can tell, they're not doing that right now. I think you would probably see that more likely if they really go for a mega APU, which I think compared to what we've had access to so far, Strix Halo with 40 compute units of RDNA 3.5, a 256-bit bus, that's a mega APU for sure. But it's still probably just going to be a 300 millimeter squared die, I think, maybe 350. That's not really mega. It's not 500. It's when you start getting close to 400 millimeters squared that I think they'd say, let's strip off some of this and put a layer on cache on top. But then you'd probably want to do it for both the CPU and the GPU. To me, this just all sounds like a Zen 6 thing, right? And there's reasons to go with the 256-bit bus without as much infinity cache too, is that you can market these as like workstation laptops that can use a terabyte of RAM. So I think there's reasons they haven't done it yet. Will they do it eventually? I think so, but I think that's going to be Zen 6. Okay. Hamza Judah writes in and says, NVIDIA didn't join the group that includes AMD, Intel, Meta, Microsoft, among other companies to create a new standard for high performance networking Ethernet. Any reason why that might be the case? Um, no, I mean, I don't really, I don't really know what it was I going to say. I'm getting tired. Sorry. I haven't really looked into that, so I wouldn't want to speak out of turn on that. But anytime you see that, didn't NVIDIA buy some networking company though? NVIDIA acquires, yeah, they acquired Mellanox and high performance data computing. So there's maybe something there with them going with their own proprietary stuff with what they've gotten from Mellanox, which, if there's one thing Nvidia loves, it's proprietary. So that'd be my guess. Mega Dave O says you just missed the world boss. I don't know what that means. The world boss. Da, 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 da. Yeah, I don't know what you mean by world boss. But let me continue. I still have some more Patreon questions. I'll probably be doing this another 20, 30 minutes. So everybody get those tipped questions now if you want to. Actually, what I have to do in about 20 or 30 minutes is go outside with a chainsaw and cut up some more trees that fell into my yard. So that's fun. And of course, prepare my house for the next tenants eventually when I move in less than a month. It's crazy how moving in less than a month already. Dylan M writes in, hey Tom, AMD Advantage has partnered with Framework. Let me put a timestamp here. 118 Framework. AMD Advantage has partnered with Framework to put a 7700S on the Framework 16 as a removable GPU. It also has a unique design where it sits external to the main chassis. Well, let me see this. I want to look at it. 7700S Framework 16. What does this thing look like here? Yeah, that is. So it's just like its own module, though, right? Like it's nothing. Let me see. Da-da-da. Do they have a video? All right. So yeah, I mean that's pretty interesting. Oh, here we go. Here's the bit. So pull it out. Let me see it. Yeah. Okay. So there we go. Let me skip through here as they take way too long to show what I want to see. Yeah. So it uses the standard module system. Um, Anyways, AMD Advantage has partnered with Framework to put a 7700S on the Framework 16 as a removable GPU. It also has a unique design where it sits external to the main chassis, so it can be extended past the back of this laptop. The cooling system is part of the GPU module, not the laptop chassis, so it can be upgraded as well. As far as I know, an upgradable laptop GPU has never been directly supported by the GPU manufacturer. With their support, do you think this will finally make the dream of upgradable gaming laptops a reality? You know, Dell also came back at some point and like tried to resurrect the MXM form factor and then kind of dropped it again. Actually, I talked to one of my contacts at Dell about that a year ago, where they were like, yep, there was one part of Dell that wanted to make it happen. And then almost overnight, they were like, waste of time. It takes up space. People don't really care. No one's buying these upgrade cards, anyways. Why are we, the main reason Dell even did it is so they could repair a laptop easily, actually. So now we're seeing something again from Framework where you have a GPU module. I think that's really cool, honestly. If I saw real indications here, and I mean real indications, that moving forward, AMD really was every year, forever, going to supply a new GPU for this laptop, I might actually get a Framework. All right, now you're getting me on board here. I feel like the IO on the Framework isn't quite to the level I want. Yeah, that'd be sick. I mean, you get a Phoenix laptop and then later have no GPU at first, still can play games in 1080p. Wait a year, and then maybe you upgrade it to like an 8700M. That's like, yeah, that'd be really cool. But I just have to say, Dylan M, I'm just continue to be a little skeptical of the longevity of this stuff because I don't know. I mean, I've just seen this story before where like a company tries to have an upgradable laptop, whether it's Dell, then they drop it overnight because no one actually bought it. I hope that doesn't happen here. So really the real question I would have, Dylan, is is this so cheap to implement that it's a no-brainer to just have it? Maybe. Or does it require a bit of extra support for AMD and Framework to do this every year? Because I just don't know that the volume's going to be there. But I hope it survives. I just wouldn't bet on it yet because the way things seem to be going with laptops is just removing GPUs and going with APUs in general. So if Framework has this niche that survives for a decade that lets you do it, keep dedicated GPUs and upgrade them, that'd be really cool. But I just wouldn't bet on it. That'd be the only thing I'd worry about. I'm getting a 7000S Framework is like, again, is this going to be like those Dell laptops where you were told you can upgrade it and then no upgrade ever comes, like no 8700S ever comes. Hopefully not, but that's what I would watch for. Chris Rich writes in and says, in the most recent episode of Broken Silicon, there was some discussion about the entry cost of modern desktop PCs. Do you see NUCs filling in a gap? Are you at all worried about NUCs potentially eating away at the bottom end of the do-it-yourself market longer term, or do you think this would help expand the overall market? Well, I think moving forward, AMD might try to do a better job of having like Phoenix come out, then Strix, then what's coming out after that? I don't know that I technically know the Strix next, but there's like Escher and Kraken and all these other APUs. So, I mean, let me put that here. Low APU replace low end. I mean, I don't really think so. I think what you're just going to see is low end GPUs become a niche market and people just buy mid range or used. I don't actually really see a gap needing to be filled here. I think you'll just get an APU that you put into your AM5 motherboard. You'll just get a used GPU. I mean, right now, if you go to eBay, I believe you can get a 5700 XT, or if you want a slightly weaker card with ray tracing support at 2070 for like 150. Everyone's like, where's like the, 1080, where's 2080 well, not 2080, but like, yeah, where's like budget performance at 150? It's the used market, guys. You can get what would be a new card for that price down there anyways. And I don't really see something replacing it so much as they don't need it anymore. That's kind of how I think these companies look at it. They're like, we always had low end cards competing with last gen used cards anyways. We might as well just let low end be taken up by the used market. And then if you need a new card, it's probably just going to be mid-range or entry or, upper low end moving forward with none of these crazy low end dies anymore. And I've heard no more Navi 24 replacements, no 34s planned. As far as the people I've talked to, doesn't sound like any of that's coming. And the 108 die from Nvidia seems to be permanently gone as well. So I don't think they really care. I just think they want the used market to fill it, and there will be APUs every now and then. But do I think a bunch of people are just going to buy NUCs instead of desktops? No, I think they're going to spend an extra $100 to get a $300 graphics card or buy a used card. At least that's what I think right now, because I just don't think NUCs are. I think NUCs are their own thing, and they're going to continue to be their own thing. Do you want something in the palm of your hand that can do everything, but not do everything perfectly? Then you get a NUC. But if you're doing a full desktop, I think you're still just going to go to the used market or something over spending $500 on an APU NUC. Okay, let me see here. Tim K writes in and says, earnings calls are coming soon. My bet is Nvidia will see them smashing earnings predictions and give out favorable prospects for Q3, all with a nice bow tie on top of another 20 to 25 injection on their stock valuation. Got to give credit where credit is due. Looking at the big three, Nvidia, Intel, and AMD, Nvidia is financially in the black on all fronts. Right now they are. We should admit that. And Intel just looks like a ruined company. The profit to earnings ratio isn't even listed because it's so bad these days. AMD is definitely hanging in there, though, considering how bad the market is. But it just seems like Jensen knew where to put his money where his mouth was when it comes to tackling a bare consumer market and making it big on HPC. MI300 is coming for sure. I'm excited that AMD will enter the space. I'm also pleased that investors are spending their product portfolios to cover the enterprise and corporate sector that have consumers ready to just fork over cash. Yeah, I mean, what do I think of NVIDIA's earnings? I don't think they're going to be bad. I don't think they're going to be bad this quarter. I mean, everything I hear is they still can't keep Hopper in stock. So, for sure, that would be my prediction. What's going to happen by quarter four, though, I think is an interesting question. I do. Yeah, I think quarter four earnings are where I might go. Let's see if the bottom falls out a little bit here on this Nvidia hype. But no, I think they're going to have a great quarter two earnings. I have no, and if they don't, whoa, that means their consumer sales are that bad, and they really might be, but we'll just have to see. But yeah, I don't think they're gonna have a bad earnings yet. Let me put that down. Nvidia earnings. All righty, so now we got some console questions. Let me put down a timestamp on that. PS5 Pro, XSX Elite. My God, Jessie is just laying at my feet right now. She wants to go outside so bad. All right. Samuel Classic writes in and says, we know it's inevitable, but have you heard anything concrete about chiplet APUs for consoles, a PS5 or XSX midlife upgrade or the next generation? Well, unless Sony is going to go with like a 400 plus millimeter square design, I don't know why they would need to use chiplets. Like, guys, you've got to understand, monolithic has its own advantages. And right now, I believe what was the PlayStation? Because the PlayStation 5's already moved to 6 nanometer. PS5 die size. Yeah, the 6 nanometer, right? I will put a link in the description once this is over as well. Right now, the die size, because they shrunk it to 6 nanometer, is like 270 millimeters squared. So the entire PS5 die is, it's smaller than a 4070, and it's 30% bigger than a 7600, well, offering you probably a little more performance than a 7600, and it's an entire console die. Like, that's pretty small, and that's on 6 nanometer. If they move to 4 nanometer, my guess would be they just go with probably a 36 40 disabled to 36 compute unit RDNA 3.5 design at like probably not 2.5 gigahertz. So what would you be looking at there? You'd probably be looking at something, it might even be like an RDNA 3.75 design that'd be 10-20% more per compute unit. And then if you clocked it faster, so 50% more in compute overall, maybe. And then they could go from 14 gigabit per second to 24. Yeah, so that's an over almost 50% increase in bandwidth. That'd be a very easy PS5 Pro to do. 40 compute units of RDNA 3.5, basically Strix Halo. And then clock it faster. give it almost double the memory speed because we just have faster GDDR6 out. And that whole die is probably going to be, you know, 3 to 400 millimeter, like 350 millimeter squared to 400 or something. Like, I don't know, guys. I don't think I don't think they need to go any bigger than that. And unless they're going to 500 millimeter squared, I think they're going to keep it monolithic. The yields on 4 nanometer are fantastic. Keeping it that small would make backwards compatibility pretty easy because you'd still have 36 compute units in a 256-bit bus. So it'd still be completely in line. It'd be hilarious, by the way, to see them in 3 in a row, 36 compute unit consoles, PS4 Pro, PS5, PS5 Pro. Um, and there'd be no need to add chiplets to that. And from what I hear about the Xbox Series X, they've designed a new Xbox die, but I think I think from what I've heard, it's also monolithic. And it almost to me sounds like more likely they're just going to shrink it to 6 nanometer, clock it faster, and give it a unified 20 gigabytes of RAM with faster RAM. If they did that, they could, yeah, they could probably raise performance about a similar amount without having to design a new die or worry about backwards compatibility issues. So that's kind of what I see happening, and neither of those really require chiplets. So I wouldn't look for a chiplet console yet. Now the PlayStation 6, maybe, but I gotta say, guys, unless they're wanting to share chiplets with Epic and desktop, which would be interesting, they don't need to make the next Xbox or PlayStation chiplet based. If it's a totally bespoke custom versions, because the PlayStation 5 version of Zen 2 is a more compact version that's supposed to like put out a little less heat, but not have some compute functionality. But you don't need the compute functionality for gaming. Like these are all somewhat bespoke versions of architectures custom made for PlayStation and Xbox, which means those chiplets can't be shared with PC anyways. You might as well make it monolithic so it's more efficient and honestly cheaper at a small die size. So that's what I would say. So far, I don't see any indications of chiplet consoles. Whether that, an ROG Ally, a Steam Deck, all of them still seem monolithic. Daniel Martin says, "You seem tired. Just wanted to buy you a coffee." I am tired. It's there's a lot going on here. You're basically working two jobs. Jesse's sneezing down there. Don't know if you can hear that. You're basically working two jobs when you're moving and then also running your channel full time. But I'm really excited about the changes coming to the channel, so it should be a good time and be totally worth it. All right, so that's the tipped questions. That's the Patreon questions. I would say I'll give you guys, before I have to go work in the yard, another 5 to 10 minutes here. If you have any lasting tipped questions or interesting questions, put them in the live chat right now. And if you're on the Moore's Law is Dead Patreon, remember, you can just submit in the after video chat channel right now, free questions. And if I have a chance to get to them in the next 10 minutes, patrons, I will. Which I guess let me give you, like, while I'm waiting for the questions to come in, plug this one more time. Guys, please hit that like button and Wings of Redemption. I'm not doing some free plug of some channel I don't know about, Buddha Smith. Hit the like button. Make sure you subscribe to the Moore's Law is Dead YouTube channel right now. Click the links in the description for Micro Center. Check out their deals. And also, please support us on Patreon. We just had a new die shrink come out that has feedback from an Nvidia engineer on what hardware is actually required to run DLSS. That's a premium video right there for patrons. You get it for $2 a month. So, and we've got a guest coming up that is a source, one of my sources in distribution that is out of the game and willing to do a tell-all interview. So again, you can ask him questions very soon if you support us on Patreon. But let me see here. What questions do we have? Well, Rogue Puppy writes in, thoughts on the A770 with all of its driver updates. Is it worth buying? Dude, you must have missed what I said earlier in the episode. I don't think so. The A750 is now 180. Who gives a shit? The 6600 8GB was already 180 anyways, uses less energy, and boots Battlefield. So, that's important for me to actually boot Battlefield. And then the A770, I really say the same thing, Let's check right now. Let's just, it's always good to actually check what current prices are because they do change over time. A770, $300 for 8GB, 8GB card. And then I think we got a 16GB model. Do we? Yeah, so Acer launched the Bifrost 16 gigabyte. It's 400. Who the hell would buy that? $400 for an A770 when you can get an RX 6700 XT, which is at worst same performance, most likely higher performance, and it comes with Starfield for 330. What are you going to do? Get a 6700 XT with Starfield or pay 30% more for the buy shit edition of the A770? Like, no, I don't recommend it. All these driver updates, and I have an A770 and I test it regularly. AMD and Nvidia are boosting performance with drivers too. It's not impressive. Still can't boot Battlefield. Um, Hamza Judah writes in, I currently have a 3060 Ti, but I want to upgrade. My budget is 550. Well, unless you're willing to wait 2 months for the 7800, in case that becomes $500. I mean, man, there's sometimes some insane. Let me put a timestamp here because I always like to have a buying advice uh, section. Buy advice. Okay, so here we go. I currently have a 3060 Ti, but I want to upgrade. My budget is around 550. What would you recommend? Well, you're going to want it to be a decent upgrade, right? So let me just check. RX 7900 or RTX 3060 Ti. Jessie going insane in the background? Yes, she is. Jessie, you got to calm down. We're going to go outside soon. Yeah, so if you wanted to double performance, you'd want to get at least a 7900 XT. So if you want to get a 7900 XT, I will say there are some insane deals on 7900 XTs right now. Your budget's 550. Yeah, there you go, 750 for it. Honestly, my recommendation would be this. You have an 8 gigabyte card. You're probably a little fed up about the issues with that. So here's my recommendation, Hamza. You say your budget's 550. Do you plan to get Starfield? If you do, the ASRock Phantom gaming card right now, at least in the new US on Newegg, is 750 and comes with Starfield Premium Edition. So really, you remove the price of a game if you were going to get it anyways. You're looking at what, like a $680 card? Can you stretch that budget another 130? Because then you're doubling performance and almost tripling RAM. This card's gonna last forever, like at 4K 60 at least, 1440p 144. It's a joke for it. The 7900 XTX is as strong as a 3090 Ti at least. It's like a hair better maybe. It's 10%, 15% stronger than a 6950 XT. That's kind of what I'd recommend going to, so it feels like a big upgrade if you need something now. Otherwise, obviously, like, you can probably sell your 3060 Ti on eBay for what, like 200 or something. If you're not willing to do that, go all the way for the 7900 XT. My honest to God advice is sell the 3060 Ti for like 200. And then I don't know, man, like look for a 6800 for 400. That's going to be something that's really only like 20% better, but it has more RAM and you're kind of not paying that much extra money, especially if you want Starfield with it. But the truth of the matter is, if you want a big upgrade, I kind of just recommend stretching your budget to one of those like $700 7900 XTs. And in fact, let me just check what it is on Micro Center, who's a sponsor of the channel, of course. 7900 XT. Do they have any crazy deals going on? 730. Yeah, so you can get $25 off your build too there. So for 700 with some of the links in the description, you can get that ASRock 7900 XT for 700. If you want the game anyways, I just recommend stretching your budget for that, because that's the sad state of affairs, is that we're in this weird situation where if you're willing to spend over 600, you actually got pretty good options for upgrades now. But if you're not willing to spend that much, unless you have a really old budget card, I don't know, then it's kind of like just a side upgrade for you. That's my opinion, though. RX 3090s are selling on eBay. So let me see here. EXI writes in, RTX 3090s are selling on eBay for 700 to 800. What are your thoughts on that? I picked up one for 750. Seems like you're asking me to tell you to make the right decision because you're asking after you bought it. And, for the 3090s on eBay, my overall advice is, do you actually need the RAM? Like, the whole reason I have like a 24 gigabyte Nvidia card is for like rendering, editing, professional work. So if you actually need 24 gigabytes of RAM, then it's, for 700. Yeah, I see one for 700 here on eBay, 650 on eBay. I don't know. The thing you got to think about is this. You're basically looking a used 3090 on eBay seems to cost 10% more than a 6950 XT. My dudes, most of the time, a 6950 XT is going to beat this 3090 by a little bit while using less energy. So I would overall recommend new 6950 XTs for 600 that come with Starfield over a 3090 on eBay. But do you need 24 gigabytes of RAM? Do you want something that the 3090 specifically does? It's not a bad deal, As long as you get it for 650 though, I'd aim for 650 or something, because at that price it's like a 4070 and you're getting double the RAM of a 4070 with 10% more performance. You have to remember it's a used card. I always feel like you should get a 10 to 30% discount for buying used over a new one, right? Like if there's a $330 6700 XT new, I think you'd want to pay no more than 250 for a used one. So that's all I would say is I wouldn't pay more than 650. And for most gamers, I'm going to say the 6950 XT because it's stronger, cheaper, new, comes with Starfield. But the 3090 is not bad if you need 24 gigs of RAM. Johnny Boy says, can AM5 finally support 4.6 of high speed memory? Well, let's wait for the reviews to point that out, but it seems like maybe. Shifty Jedi writes in and says, Tom, I'm looking at getting my mom a laptop with DDR5 and at least 16 gigabytes since she likes to have a lot of browser tabs open at the same time. When do you think we'll get laptops in the $650 to $1,000 range? Well, just look for a laptop that's upgradable. I know OEMs are trying to nickel and dime you with RAM right now, but like I upgraded a NUC for my girlfriend and I think I paid, her main system is a Rembrandt Plus gaming NUC, and it runs everything really well, like 1080p 60. I'm actually surprised. It's perfect, and it like fits in her purse, so she can bring it anywhere. But like I got like 32 gigabytes of DDR5 for like $50 or something. So you've got to ask and so think about what that means. You can get a single 16 gigabyte stick then. I think for like, yeah, I got one for Dan. I got one for Dan or something. I think it was DDR4. I don't remember. I think I got him a 16 gigabyte stick for like $15 recently, for his laptop that he uses on the go, which sometimes is used for the channel, of course. So I gotta say, why are you waiting for laptops to get to a cheap price with a lot of RAM when you can just get a $650 laptop and add in a $15 stick of RAM, my dude? A lot of Asus and HP laptops let you upgrade the RAM too. A lot of laptops from every brand, but I've noticed Asus tends to leave a slot open, and at least the HP Envy laptops I've used recently always have the 15T laptops always have open slots of RAM. Very easy. You just need one of those star screwdrivers. You open it up, slot it in. Work like a charm. I have 32 gigabytes of RAM on my HP laptop. I didn't go try to buy some new laptop. I just spent $20 and upgraded it. So that's what I'd recommend. Get a laptop for $650 and then upgrade it with $15 of RAM. Do we have any questions here? No, we don't have any in that. So all righty. You know what? I think that's gonna do it. I'm tired and I don't want to fall apart here. So again, thank you for watching. Please hit the like button. Please share this. I leaked that Meta is leaning towards leaving Intel. Share this. This is a big leak out of the channel. Share what I leaked about 4060 Ti sales. You saw someone bring up a leak about 7800 and 7700 pricing. That leak was just what I said a week ago. Share my stuff so people see when I'm leaking things first. And this is some pretty big information. And of course, remember to subscribe to the Moore's Laws at YouTube channel. Half of the viewers this month are not yet subscribed. Trying to get those numbers up. That really helps the channel a lot. Hit the bell button. Also, click the links in the description. Support Micro Center. I'm so happy to have them as a long-term sponsor. And you clicking on those links keeps them a sponsor, puts bread on the table for the channel. And frankly, their deals are insane. So you really should check them out. I genuinely think so. And then also support the Patreon, $2 a month. You get like 1 hour of videos, exclusive, ad free, multiple times a month for patrons. Ask us questions, access to the Discord. $4 tier gets Broken Silicon early and ad free. The ability to ask me and Dan questions, free reader mail for loose ends, like you've been hearing this whole time. Trying to get the Patreon numbers up there. Having reliable Patreon support is a really big deal because it's just reliable income where I don't have to worry about, oh, how many ads am I going to put in this? And so, yeah. All right. Thank you to everybody for watching and have a good rest of your week.